Welcome, Miško. We're
Hello.
very grateful for your willingness to talk to us and for having you involved in our project also in this way. Um, you are many things, and I would say that today you are perhaps first and foremost a scholar, and you've written an enormous amount and have also invested an enormous amount of scholarly attention and care into disclosing the history or charting the history of the avant-garde in what was once Yugoslavia. But it's not your impressive career as an academic and a curator that brings you here today, but your involvement in conceptual art collectives such as the Group 143, which was from 75 to 1980, I think. 80, and the Community for Space Investigation from 82 and 19 to 1989. Now, for the audience present, not now, but in the future, we are all a bit astronauts in time. For that audience, and for those who are not necessarily aware of what went on at your end, could you briefly tell us what your role was in the avant-garde conceptual art scene of the 70s and 80s, and in which conditions you had to operate?
Yes, yes, it's a nice question. Thank you. My life on some way is very complicated. I go in same time in different directions, and my life story on public way start in 1972. In that time, I finished my grammar school and start to produce art. Because I have not been trained artist, I produce different experimental experiments between poetry and visual art. But I have not been poet and I have not been painter. I work something in between. This definition of it in between is my really non-media in all my life. To be between different disciplines, different media. But in time of studying electrotechnic, engineering, I produce art in Students' Culture Center. It was my most creative period of artistic productions. I work with the group 143 and with many different groups which exist in that time. For example, in that time around the Students' Culture Center exist about 20 different small groups of young people from the different universities, different faculties. Some produce rituals like people who come from medicine. Some visual artists produce anti-paintings. But for me, from the starting point was important theory. It was something what is was something what I feel as my area. And I connect art with this area of the theoretical research in the space of the art, working with the theory in the frame, space, or context of art. I find I have 10, in that time I have 19, 20 years old. For me was important 2 or 3 examples. I find one in socialist time, it was not difficult, it was not easy to buy foreign books. But in Belgrade exists one bookshop in Students' Culture Center with foreign books. And find in this bookshop fantastic book which changed my life. It has been Paul Klee Pedagogical Sketchbook. What was fascinated with this book? Not metaphysics of Paul Klee, but his possibility that everything what he saw produce like diagrams. And it was one point, starting point for me. Second thing was book which I got for my birthday, 18th birthday. It was Ludwig Wittgenstein, Philosophical Investigation. It was a revolution in my mental life. In that moment, I saw that I could make similar things without calling and referring on the Friedrich Nietzsche. Because in my grammar school, every clever boy or girl mentioned Nietzsche's clever statements. Wittgenstein offers something very stupid, how to try to discuss my own impossibility to say things on a clear way. And this possibility was important push for me in the frame of the art. How to produce art without mystification. And But on this basis, I find some interesting artists for me. It was the Slovenian group OHO, very important in that time with international career. They are 10 years older than me in that time.
Yeah.
Then a group of the young people from Novi Sad, Group Code and Group E. These two groups have been people who are not visual artists. They come from literary studies, but they don't produce literature in that time. They produce something what is like conceptual art. And of course, in that time, I met first time text and discussions by group Art Language, British group.
Yeah.
This connection was very important for me. And you see, every of these things have connected within visuality, theoretical discourse, and possibility to discuss things and communicate with other people.
Yeah.
Because art language group have one formula. They write in mathematical logic sentences. Because I studied technical school, mathematical logic was my native language. And I find this sentence. The sentence is, X is different from Y. X and Y are member of art language and discuss. And for me, artworks became subjects for the discussion.
Yeah.
Not just a result for the exhibiting, but for the discussion.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
And in the time I met, it was 74, 75, I met one very important. At that time, he was artist from Novi Sad, but he died a year ago as Hungarian artist in Budapest, is Balin Sombati. He was artist who traveled between Belgrade, Novi Sad, where he lived, and Budapest, Prague, and other East European countries, and make this important thing, fascination for the East European artist, how to communicate through the iron wall, how to go to the walls. And these things connected me with this question, how to produce language, how to communicate interpretation visual as language, how to communicate with the people from the different culture and different generation.
Yeah.
In that frame, start my work and participation in group 143.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've already begun to talk about, I suppose the two other main questions I would want to pose. So, arts and language brings us a little bit to, geographically towards the West. One of the questions I have is, how did you, and also the group 143, the other groups you belong to, or how did you view the West and relate to it, both as an idea and as a geocultural or artistic space? Was the West seen as the sort of the center, and I'm putting this between quotation marks, of the avant-garde, as an imperialist or a colonizing force? And perhaps also, did you differ about its understanding of what counted as avant-garde?
It's specific question for the existence of socialist Yugoslavia. Because in that time, people of my generation, or a little bit older or younger, had been underground artists. They work on some kind of the secret places. They produce some izdats, publications. They communicate out of the frame of the institutions. But social Yugoslavia has one very intelligent, clever, and danger game with West and East, because it had been state between East and West, communist country with the Western ideals, or Western ideals of commodity, the better way, not of liberal democracy, but better commodity. They play game between East and West, especially after the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. In that time, Yugoslav communist was afraid that Soviet will continue and take Yugoslavia. And they play game with specific institutions. It is students and youth cultural institutions. It means they organize existence of Students' Culture Center in Belgrade. Zagreb had been older. Novi Sad, Sarajevo, Ljubljana was last built. And this culture center was alternative space. It means that country could show to the West, we have art as West had, but we show you their freedom. But same space they could to the Soviet Union and said, yes, we have free spaces like westernized boys and girls, but we control everything but by our directors of culture centers. So it was double game. This double game gave possibility that we make really free experiments without going out. What does mean out? Going outside of the institution. In institution of youth people, you can make exhibition, you can dance naked, you can make different experiments with the formal, informal kind of productions, performances, and environmental works, etc. But you have been in first time cut from the communication in the local high culture. And then at the end of 70s, these borders became open. But from the beginning of the 70s to the 78, 79, it was very specific kind of reservat. In 74 was one big discussion in Belgrade, in Students' Culture Center. It was April meeting, Expanded Media Festival. And the participator on this exhibition and festival was Achille Bonito Oliva, Italian art critic and curator. And he said this sentence, yes, you are fantastic, you are free, you can do what you want, but you are inside of this building. But what does mean of this building? In that time, I have 20 years. I had 20 years. And it was my first public exhibition. I put photos with my face and some intervention on my face. But on this exhibition, I was together with Joseph Beuys. It was impossible for the most German young artists in that time. In this combination, it was possible in such paradoxal space. Yeah. But in reality, nobody cared about it. It was the closed frame. And it was this kind of the game. And, yeah. this game was different. For example, Croatia was very emancipated in the relations with the visual art, very open. Communist Party of Croatia supports such kind of exhibition like New Tendencies and exhibition of new conceptual art. Their city gallery or gallery of the contemporary art supported. Belgrade started to make this relation between student centers and the Museum of Contemporary Art, for example. Person who was curator in Museum of Contemporary Art, Jesha De Negri, also participated in many actions in Students' Culture Center. He was the Sunway leader, and he made this bridge. But in Novi Sad, two conceptual artists, when they published their poems in Students' Magazine, Miroslav Mandić, he made poem about the short film about Josip Broz Tito, president of Yugoslavia, and Slavko Bogdanović, he made long poem about the Students' Cultural Center in Novi Sad with many bad words and provocation, got 8 months of the prison for it. Yeah. Or joke, if you make access in Slovenia, you got a scholarship for United States. When you make access in Croatia, they take your passport. If you make access in Belgrade, you have to go to the discussions in police office. If you make such kind of the access in Novi Sad, in Vojvodina, or in Sarajevo, you can go to prison. Yeah. It was a different political situation in different republics. Yeah. And it is how the historical Yugoslav disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if I go back to my question on how you related to the West, your answer would be we related to the West inside of the exhibition spaces that were given to us, but not.
Yes, but we met. I met Joseph Beuys.
Yeah.
I met some members of our language.
Yeah.
I met some people from Italian body art,
Yeah.
like Gina Pane or many others.
All right.
Rebecca Horn from Germany, etc.
Yeah.
And it was some kind of the direct communication and
Yeah.
its possibility that we exhibit on West.
Yeah.
For example, in 1977, a few artists from Belgrade, Raša Todosijević, Zoran Popović, Group 143, ex-member of Group OHO in Slovenia, Andras Šalamun, and Mladen Stilinović, who is now really international superstar, in Croatia, exhibit on Paris Biennale 77. And it was our first meeting or direct relation, not on the Yugoslav soil, but in the Western context. In that sense, it was possibility. But also Yugoslavia had, but it was also from other East European countries. Poland have dream about the United States. They have this dream also today. We have in that time the idea that people, artists from America, are our friends. Many of them we didn't meet them. Some of them we met, and it was this relation. It was the mythology that we are free to communicate. Is it real communication? I'm not sure today, but it was possibility, potentiality, and this ideal of openness. First time in my life, I saw very important Czechoslovakian body artist Karen Miller, Peter Stembera, Jan Mlčoch, but I didn't saw them in context of the Czechoslovakia. I find their photos in Italian flash art magazine because one girl from Czechoslovakia married with the director of the flash art, and she make this collaborative line, and they come for me not as East European, but as Western artists. But they really live in underground life in Czechoslovakia in that time.
Yeah, no, I see. Which brings us to, I think, my last question, because we're also interested in seeing the relationship towards the East, of course, and perhaps also to the global ambit that is tied to what was then still Soviet Russia. So I understand that in the 70s and 80s as well. It's only in the 90s, I suppose, that Russia becomes accessible, and it's the Neue Slowenische Kunst who people for the first time sort of reach out to it. So for nonconformist artists, connecting with the East would have been possible only through Hungary, Czechia, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, which you also already mentioned. How did those, you've begun to talk about those relationships already, but did they also open up a gateway towards what is now called, or what is called the Global South and other regions in the sort of further expansion of this openness, or as you say, perhaps the myth of openness you were allowed to experience and perhaps also help create?
My fourth exhibition in life, in short artistic life, was in Poland, in Warsaw. And it was the exchange between Belgrade's Students' Culture Center and some galleries in Poland. Poland is a fantastic place for the academic research today in that time, because Poland was under Soviet hand. They have totally controlled, but Polish culture is too big, too large, too fantastic, and they have their level of existence which party support on unofficial way. And this communication was fantastic with Poland. For example, in that time, I met Natalie LL. She was superstar and one of the first emancipated women feminist artists, similar to the Novi Sad's artist Katalin Ladik. And this relation with the Poland was possible in that time, and very, very important this exchange was. But it was different way of the existence. Because in Yugoslavia, you have official possibility to participate in public life through the closed institution. In Poland, this institution has been something what is underground, but they have been really institutions. In Czechoslovakia, such exhibition doesn't exist. In that, such institution doesn't exist. And it is different in that time. It was not everything same. But also in that time, it has been important two statements. Going on, try to going on from the day to day, from the week to week, from the year to year. And second, how to go out. And these positions going out, it's mean that we try to make, as Jesha de Negri call it, communicate on the direct relation with the Western artists and critics. And it was important guest. From other side, in Yugoslavia, very important in the ideological position of the state and Yugoslav Communist Party was relations with the global south, with the third world. This process of decolonization, especially with India, Egypt, and Indonesia, was very important connections. And these connections but they had been on the highest level. They had been on the state level. And they have not been connected with some kind of experimental art in that countries on non-official art. It has been on the level of the official art, but because what is the official art in that time in third world or in ex-Yugoslavia or in all socialist countries? It is high modernism in socialist circumstances. What is mean? Socialist modernism, it's mean reception of the Western formal solutions in producing for painting and sculptures. Henry Moore in sculpture, late Picasso and Matisse in painting, but connected with the universal communist or emancipated ideals, human freedom, freedom of nation, anti-fascist ideas. On the global south, this idea was questioned how to connect national or ethnical or racial emancipation with the Western language of modernity. But it has not been art of experiments. It has been art of great creativity. In that time, I don't like that kind of art. Today, I think some of this art practice has been fantastic, very creative, very important. But in that time, they have been connected with institutional modes of the production of reality for us.
Yeah, no, I see. So from your, at that point, nonconformist stance, you just didn't have access to any of those networks. And they weren't available to you to actually tap into. Okay. Let me look at the time. Yeah.
34.
Time flies. Time flies. Is there any? Well, let me perhaps first say that I'm very sorry you're not going to be there the days, because I'm sure you could have participated in all the discussions and would have added something very substantial each time. Is there anything you would like to say in closing?
In the closing, for me, in that time was important really work. It was important work in two groups. For me, artwork was the questions of groups. Why people in East Europe or in third world or global south work in groups? Because they need to construct their own institutions, own microstructures of the forms of life. And these groups has not have been administrative production of art. It has been groups of sharing modes of the life. And for me, the group 143 was artistic group, which produced some kind of the conceptual research of visuality and linguistic languages. From other side, the community of the research of the space, from the ZIP to make in native pronunciation, had been important in 80s as place where group people from different groups try to produce the textual interpretation of contemporary culture and relation. In that time, first time in 86, we produced one magazine, Mental Space, which discuss question of the influences of the Far and Near East on European avant-garde and modern art. It was our first, in that time we call it intersemiological relations with other countries and other relations. So this question was important, but they start in late 70s and in mid 80s for us.
Yeah.
And I think it is. It's working between syntax of visual language to the cultural relations with the different models. It was the question how we try to exist.
Yeah. This is a very nice thought. Miško, I love you, and I hope that the next time we meet will be actually in person again.